Okay, so now we're going to continue on talking about ritual. So you've done at this point a practice meditation, a guided meditation. And so this is something that Buddhists are encouraged to do every single day. Just a lay person who is a Buddhist, will try to fit this into their schedule however and whenever they can. It may be, short meditations. I've seen, encouragements to just, even if you can just, stop and take in 2 deep breaths or something like that. It can be longer depending on the individual, their interest in meditation, and how it can fit into their schedule. But Buddhist monks and nuns do meditate for hours every day. So meditation is really seen as the core piece of that hard work that you have to do to overcome suffering, right? Because to overcome suffering, you have to overcome your attachments. And in Buddhism, it's understood that we just naturally become attached to things, right? We live in the delusionary state that things are permanent. So when good things happen, we become attached to them. So through meditation, we start to learn more about our minds. We learn more about our thought processes. And we can see when this is happening, right? We can watch our emotions. We can watch our thoughts. We can become an observer to ourselves. And we can see when we are doing this, right? We can see when this is happening. And we can try to redirect those emotions and those ideas, right? When something bad happens, right? My automatic reaction may be to get angry or to get frustrated. But through meditation, I can learn to become an observer of that emotion. Okay, I can feel that I'm getting angry. I see that that's sort of what my body wants to naturally do. That's what my mind naturally wants to do. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let my mind do that, to continue with these angry thoughts and these frustrated thoughts, because there's no reason for me to be angry, right? When something good ended or something bad happened in my life, I have to remember that it's all impermanent, right? Every good thing was going to end at some point, and if something tragic has happened, I know that it's not going to last forever, right? That things are always changing. So the idea is that through meditation, you are training your mind, and you are also learning to become more aware of the world, right? You are aware of things that you never were before, because our minds and our thoughts are a distraction, right? Our minds are always going. We're constantly thinking about things, right? What I have to do later today, what I have to do tomorrow, all the things in the past that I wish I didn't do, or I wish I had done better, something like that. So remember, it's those thoughts that are drawing our mind in those two different directions, right? We're always thinking about something in the future or something in the past. So by becoming more aware through meditation of the present moment, by just sitting in the present moment, we can also learn how to be present without thinking about the past or the future, right? To be appreciative for this very moment, to be fully absorbed in this very moment, right? If I start to become aware of those things, I can appreciate the uniqueness and amazingness of this very moment. Instead of, if I'm thinking about the future or the past, I'm not really here. I'm not really present. So my life just kind of passes me by. So there's lots of different goals and benefits of meditation. As I said, there's lots of different types of meditation. Many of you may have done different types of meditation, but these are some of the main kind of parameters or goals within Buddhism of practicing meditation, is to learn how to train your mind so that you become absorbed in the present moment. And the idea is that through that you will feel more joy, because you will realize how amazing this moment is, right? Instead of looking forward to something in the future or being nostalgic about something in the past. So meditation is really the key part of that hard work that we have to do in order to overcome our attachments and therefore overcome suffering. So now we're going to move on. I have here monthly visit to temple. And what I mean by this is pretty similar to what I mentioned in the Hinduism unit, which is that, just to know, in Buddhism, there's no holy day of the week. There's no special day of the week that like everybody goes to temple and there's, sort of like a group service or ceremony. If you go to a Buddhist temple in California, it's very likely that they will have something like that, but that's more of an accommodation to Western influence, that it's sort of, it's if modeled after the traditions of local religions like Christianity and Judaism. But in Asian countries, there's not necessarily like one service, each week that everyone goes to. The temple is just like a Hindu temple. It's a sort of open and free-flowing atmosphere. So you go and visit your temple as often or as little as you feel personally called to or personally attracted to. You would visit your temple for a lot of different reasons. You would go for holidays, of course. You'd go during special days of the year. You would go for instruction. So you would go to hear talks, lessons, teachings about Buddhism, about meditation, things like that. And those could happen at various points during the week or during the month. And you would also go to help out your local community of monks or nuns. So we already talked about the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns. And in Buddhism, you want to help them out. So if you have a temple near you, there are monks or nuns that live there. Community members will also volunteer their time to cook for the monks or nuns, to clean the temple, to maintain the temple for them, because the idea is that if that individual has reached that lifetime where they can fully devote themselves to their practice, to Buddhism and to achieving enlightenment, then the community respects that. They very much respect that person is able to do that during this lifetime. So they want to support that effort. They want to support that endeavor, and let that person have the freedom to fully devote themselves to their practice. So a monk or a nun, depends on their community to bring them food, to cook for them, to take care of the temple, manage the finances of the temple, maybe to do all the things that would normally take up a lot of time and would become a distraction for them if they're really trying to focus on meditation and enlightenment and those types of things. So you could visit the temple for all of those different reasons. So, just like in Hinduism, you could go to a temple every single day if you wanted to meditate there, if you wanted to show respect to an image of the Buddha, you wanted to light a candle or incense and sort of have that spiritual moment, or you could go once a month, or you could go once a year, whatever you personally feel called to do. So that would be on some sort of a regular basis. Would definitely be encouraged to visit your temple on a regular basis. And then yearly, we have two major holidays that are celebrated in Buddhism. The first one is the Buddha's birthday, and this usually occurs in April. Sometimes it's as early as March, sometimes as late as May. But it's usually in the spring, usually in April. And it's, of course, the celebration of the day of the birth of the Buddha. And traditionally, it usually kind of celebrates not just his birth, but his whole life. Because according to several of the stories about Siddhartha Gautama, it was on the same day of the year that he was born, he became enlightened, and he died. So all of that happened on the same date in the year. So all of those things are celebrated on the Buddha's birthday. It's a celebration of him, of his enlightenment, and, that he has shown the path for Buddhists around the world for how to accomplish the same thing. And Buddha's birthday is celebrated throughout the Buddhist world in all different Buddhist countries, and it's celebrated in a variety of different ways, kind of depending on the local culture. There can be celebratory aspects to it, like parades and lighting of lanterns and candles and getting together with family and having a big meal. So there is that celebratory, kind of birthday party aspect to it. And then also for many people, it's a day of devotion to spiritual practice. So it could be a day that you go to the temple and you hear a talk on Buddhism. You go and you try to learn more about the Buddha and about your path. So it is also a day that should be dedicated to remembering the example of the Buddha, remembering his teachings, and kind of a recommitment of yourself to follow those teachings. Then the second holiday that I have here is the robe ceremony. And this is something that is celebrated in monasteries, so in Buddhist temples, where there are monks or nuns, where there is a local Sangha living there. Not every Buddhist temple has, a community of monks or nuns attached to it, but many do. And the robe ceremony traditionally was the one time of year that the community would give all the monks and nuns a new robe. Because when you dedicate your life to becoming a monk or nun, right? Traditionally, you give up all your possessions, and you give up all your clothes, and you'd put on the robes of the monk. So that's your only garment. You probably have more than one, but that's the only thing that you wear. So if you're wearing it every day or almost every day, you would need a new one each year. So the community would get together, they would pool their money together, and they would buy a new robe for each of their local monks or nuns. But now it's kind of expanded to it's not just a robe that is given. Usually the community, this is a day of donation for whatever a monk or a nun might need. So traditionally, monks and nuns are not supposed to handle money, right? They've given up family life, they've given up having a career, so they don't earn any money. And really, they're not supposed to even, traditionally, they're not supposed to handle money. That becomes much more difficult in the modern world, but traditionally, they're not supposed to have anything to do with that. So they rely on their communities for everything that they need, right? So anything that a person might need over the course of the year, that is donated during the robe ceremony. So all sorts of toiletries, right, that people might need. You need soap, you need a toothbrush, you might need warm clothes, you might need a pen and paper, just any type of instrument or item that a monk or a nun might need in their everyday life. People come together and they donate whatever they can and whatever they think their community might need. So that's done once a year during the robe ceremony, and how the donations are handled is definitely different in different cultures and different parts of the world. But in general, the local community gets together and they donate whatever their community needs because they respect the choice that they've made and they want to support them. They want to free them from having to deal with money and having to worry about all these things that the rest of us have to worry about, so they can focus on their practice completely. Okay, then I have down here spending a period of time in a monastery, and this is just sort of just to note that there is this interesting tradition in many Asian countries and many Buddhist countries that becoming a monk or a nun, you don't have to do it for your entire life. In Western traditions, you may know about Catholic monks and nuns. It's really the only form of Christianity that has those types of individuals that decide to dedicate their entire lives to a religious tradition instead of getting married. So to become a Catholic monk or a Catholic nun, that's a lifelong choice, right? So you decide to enter into the monastery, and the plan is that you'll do it for your entire life. But in Buddhism, you can do that, and that is frequently done, that someone decides that this is what I want to dedicate my life to. I want to dedicate my life to my practice. But you can also do it for a short period of time. So you can take on the vows of a monastery or a temple for a week, a month, a year, a couple years. And the idea is that is a great thing to do. And it's really a great form of preparation for life as an adult. So in many Buddhist countries, especially in Southeast Asia, there is a tradition that it's strongly encouraged for young men and women to spend some period of time in a monastery before really they have a job, they have a family, and they become an adult member of society. So that could be maybe between high school and college, it could be after college during a summer, but to put on the robes, to take the vows of a monk or a nun, and to live as a monk or a nun for a specific period of time. The idea is that's a great way to learn intensely about Buddhism. You get a lot of practice in meditation, and you're going to learn lessons that you can take with you into your adult life. Even if you're not going to continue on as a monk or a nun, it's going to be extremely beneficial for you as, a husband, wife, a mother, father, someone who is working in the society, a member of your community, because you've learned all those lessons through having that intense practice for a little while. So this is something that is done is done by many individuals throughout the Buddhist world, and like specifically in Thailand, it's required that the king has to do this. The king, before he can become king, he has to spend a period of time in a Buddhist monastery, living as a monk, because that's going to teach him how to be a compassionate and benevolent ruler of his country. So it's really something that's very respected, and it can be done just for a short amount of time, as is, as can fit into an individual's life. Then the last thing I have down here are funeral ceremonies. In Buddhism, death is very important, because it is something that we have to face. We have to face head on in Buddhism. It is the ignorance of death, or the sort of refusal to think about death, that is part of that ignorance. It's part of that illusion, right? That we think of ourselves as permanent. We mistakenly think of ourselves as permanent, instead of really living with the fact each day that we're going to die, right? Impermanence applies to us too. That's what anatman is all about, right? There's nothing about me that's permanent. And as soon as I can accept that, I can start living more compassionately, and I can start moving away from my attachments. So funeral ceremonies are very important in Buddhism. There's no one sort of set Buddhist funeral. It depends on the denomination, it depends on the country or the individual culture. But usually in general, it is a time when you are really supposed to be reminded of death, that this is something that happens to all of us. It's inappropriate to have too much of a show of grief, right? Because that's sort of showing that you're not accepting impermanence, right? That you should be able to accept that this individual has passed, that they were not a permanent part of your life, because no one is. Everything changes. And especially as an individual is dying in Buddhism, it's very important to sort of surround them with a calming atmosphere, because the state of mind in which you die can have a strong impact on your karmic results of your life, and the creation of the situation of your next lifetime. So it's important when you do die that you want to die with a calm mind, with a peaceful mind, sort of facing your death bravely, because that can have a strong impact on your next lifetime. And then usually Buddhist funeral ceremonies, they will involve a Buddhist monk or nun, who will come and do chanting and say certain words from Buddhist scriptures, and certain rituals that are done depending again on the denomination and the culture. And usually it's not just one ceremony or one ritual. Buddhist funerals tend to have certain parts to them. So at different intervals after the death, certain ceremonies are done, or certain rituals are done that involve certain chants and words, and actions that are prescribed by that denomination. The general idea of it is that in Buddhism, there's an understanding that there's a period of time between your lifetimes. So once you die, you don't immediately get reincarnated. There is some length of time where your karma, remember it's not your soul, but it's basically your karma, is in kind of a limbo state before it re-enters the world in its next lifetime. So the different rituals that are done at these different intervals are done in the hopes of sort of helping that individual, helping them sort of guide them into a better next lifetime and keep them calm during that transitional phase. So those are just some of the general parameters, but it's important to know in Buddhism, there's not a lot of ritual, right? If we're calling meditation a ritual, but other than that, there's not a lot of ritual, because Siddhartha Gautama criticized how ritualistic Hinduism was, that there were so many different rituals that you had to do in Hinduism. So in Buddhism, there's not a lot of rituals other than the funeral. The funeral ends up being a very important ritual, because it is seen as having an impact on the karmic results in the next lifetime of your loved one, that you here in this world can have an impact on that. You can help them, help guide them into a better next lifetime. Okay, so that's all we have for ritual, and next we're going to move on to ethics.